Thank you all for joining us. I guess we're going to start because we don't want to let you guys wait longer than you need to. And we brought a wonderful panel here, and we only have, what, 40 minutes now? Yeah, so we only have 40 minutes. So we want to make sure that we give them the time to share some of their wisdom with us. So this panel is all around simplicity, the theme of the conference. And specifically, simplicity in the age of agile scaling. So when I walked around most of the rooms today, I heard that every single session had at least one question about how to scale agile. So it seems to be a topic that is on top of everyone's mind at the moment. So what we are going to do with our panel here is explore what this means to simplicity, how simplicity can be brought in, what are the extra challenges that we get, and so forth. And I have four wonderful people here, and I'm going to introduce them one by one. I'm going to start with Ellen. So Ellen, you're an Agile coach and a trainer, and you're working for Agile Partnership, if I'm correct. And I know that you have worked with an awful lot of governmental organizations, but also with small teams. So when you look at those two extremes, how would you see the biggest differences, and especially when you think about simplicity?
I think the biggest differences between the two sizes of organizations is the smaller shops don't have the illusion that they need to scale because their problems are big and complex. I spend more time working with bigger organizations at the moment, government and big companies. And one of the things that I notice is they like to jump right to, oh my gosh, how are we going to scale this? We are a big organization, so we must start from thinking about what scaling framework is right for us to spread this idea across our organization. And that totally distracts them from the actual problems they're trying to solve. It's something that enables them to think that they're making change without actually changing anything.
So it's almost like the focus is more on the process than actually on the results that they're trying to achieve.
The focus is on the process rather than the results. And with small shops, they don't have the luxury, I'll say, of worrying about that. They're focused on what are the outcomes we need to get to right away.
What pays the bill?
And I really wish my larger clients would think about that first rather than the how do we change everybody's labels and set up different names on our meetings.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's a really good segue into our next panelist, Scott Ambler, from Scott Ambler and Associates. Scott, I think most people around this room here know that you have been one of the co-creators of DAD, Disciplined Agile Delivery, and its recent extensions as well, or expansions. But when you look at the big picture, the overview picture of scaled, or not scaled Agile, but DAD, there's an awful lot going on there. It looks kind of overwhelming to some people. Might introduce more complexity than is necessary, some say. So what would be your response to, or your reaction to this? Does it need to be this complex? Is it as complex as we think it is, or what's going on?
So yeah, that's a great question. So, and we get that all the time. And because when you do look at some of our diagrams, like the big diagram, we've got the booth, for example, there's a lot of bubbles there. There is some inherent complexity. And whenever somebody asks me this question or something close to it, my response is always, well, okay, fine, but what would you take out? What would you take out? And then the conversation almost goes something like this. Well, you know, we don't really do this, we don't really do that. So, well, wait, we as a company don't really do that, or you as an individual? Well, no, me as an individual, I don't do procurement. Well, do you have a procurement group? Yes. Are they good? No, and then you hear this bitching session about how bad the procurement guys are. But it's like, well, so wouldn't it be better? Shouldn't the procurement people get some help? Like, shouldn't they be, helped and coached and given better choices? Because I have to think, not knowing them, but I have to think they're good, decent, smart people doing the best they can in the situation that they face. But maybe they don't know that there's better ways of working. Maybe they believe they're not allowed to get better. Maybe they, let's go talk to them, find out what's actually going on here. But I know for a fact that you have procurement, and it sounds like it can get better, so let's help them out. And then the conversation ends up being, and they start looking at the diagram more, and they go, oh crap, well, wait a minute, now that I think about it, you don't have this. Okay, so now it's like, well, wait a minute, 2 minutes ago you're telling me how it's too complex. Now you're telling me it's not complex enough.
Right.
Let's make a choice here, right? And so our approach is, and fundamentally, if you don't have to do it. So say you work in a company that you didn't have to do procurement. Okay, fine, X out the procurement bubble. Not exactly hard, ignore the procurement stuff and move on, right? Not a big deal. So that's the entire thing, right? Like it reflects the inherent complexity of our organizations.
Right.
And we don't want to ignore that. I think it's a fundamental mistake to not embrace the complexity, and obviously try to get things better and make it better, make it more simple. But you have this complexity, we need to engage, and if we don't engage, then the procurement people will be constantly shooting in the foot, or the finance people, or whatever, and they're not doing it on purpose. It's just they have their religion, they believe in whatever they believe in, and maybe they're not looking at the bigger picture.
Right.
And because the bigger picture is ugly. It's a big, ugly picture.
So if I could summarize, and I think, or at least the way that I interpret it is as complex as it needs to be, but not simpler than that.
Exactly,
Right.
and
so you can't leave anything out.
And we give people choices, and some of the complexity is in being honest about, when you do procurement or when you do finance, there are a bunch of different ways you can do procurement. And here are your options, and some options are obviously better than others. And here are the trade-offs that you're making, so choose intelligently. But what happens is when you start giving people options, then suddenly, holy crap, there's like 50 different techniques we can do for procurement.
Yep. Okay.
Wow, this is nasty.
So let's move on. Let's move on to the next panelist, Joshua, from Industrial Logic. And for people who actually have seen these slides come up in the meantime, you can ask your own questions. Just go to slide.do. And that's the code over there you need to type in to ask your own questions and moderate them yourself as an entire team. So Joshua, to you. You introduced us to Modern Agile. I would assume that many people never heard of Modern Agile. And when you talked about it this morning, you talked specifically around 4 principles, and you somehow mapped them to the 4 values in the Agile Manifesto. The Agile Manifesto also has 12 principles on top of the 4 values. So it almost looks like Modern Agile is trying to strip out everything that is not absolutely essential to the core of being Agile. And what does that mean for the users of Modern Agile in terms of support, in terms of guidance to implement those principles?
Oh, yeah, great question. And thanks for organizing the panel. So the Modern Agile principles are basically there to help guide you. And the actual practices you need to implement those principles are vast. And especially when we consider that Modern Agile is not targeted just at software development. So it would be really ridiculous to say, here's the set of things you should go do, but this only applies to this one area of human endeavor, say software development. But in reality, if you're going to implement a Modern Agile approach, you can figure out what practices to try as experiments and see if they help you deepen your practice of those principles. In other words, do you want to try test-driven development? Is that going to add any safety to your environment? Is it going to help you deliver value continuously? And you might say, well, it could, so let's try it. That's an example. So you typically will need some guidance, though, if you have no idea. If you're completely new, for example, to this stuff, you typically will need guidance in what particular set of practices could help you implement those principles.
Right. Okay. Well, that's great. So thank you so much for that answer. So let me introduce the last panelist. That's Adriana Girdler. And I hope I pronounced your last name correctly. I've been doing a lot of practicing on that one. And you're the least known, I would assume, in this particular community, because you're not necessarily working with software teams, you're not necessarily doing Agile coaching, but a lot of the work that you do with executive leadership is in line with what these people do as well. You're actually trying to help companies improve, get more outcomes, if you will, improve their efficiency and so forth. In terms of your work as Chief Efficiency Officer, I've learned, how would you compare your work, or how would you explain your work, and especially looking at simplicity as well?
It's interesting because the work that I do, Agile, and the efficiency work I do really is cut from the same cloth. If anything, the work that I do is from a Lean Six Sigma background, and I don't know if some of you who are Agile may know of it, and it's been around for a long time. I mean, it came from the TPS, Toyota Production Systems, from World War II, GE in 1950, and throughout the years. And what I find interesting is it really comes down to an efficiency and effective methodology. And it doesn't matter where you come from, whether you're Agile, Lean, TPM, TQM, whatever it may be. We all are really cut from the same cloth. Why? We want to bring value to the customer. It's all about the customer, right? How do we provide that value? And then number two, how do we do things that are better, simpler, effective, and efficient? So it doesn't matter what we do. You know, I originally started off in manufacturing and in engineering, and then got into project management. And now with my own company, I do touch so many different organizations. I actually do software projects, and we do implement Agile techniques. But what I find is, in order to truly bring the efficiency word out, which is really what we're all doing here, right? How do we be efficient and effective? Is we really need to start with the leadership. And I do kind of a three-prong approach. One is education, number one. You got to educate, because if they don't get it, it doesn't matter. Otherwise, you become siloed. Number two, once we do the education, is we have to roll it out and really start ensuring that everyone else understands it. And then number three is we got to focus on the culture. And I also, years ago, I was pure in my approach. Had to be this way, must be, no way. And now I've learned over the years, you know what? I let go of that, because I haven't really come across an organization, unless you're like a Toyota or things like that, that truly get it and work from the top down, bottom up, sideways. You know, it's just they live and breathe it. So I start to pick and choose and pick based on the industry, based on the people, based on how much they have to do. And doing that, I see greater the success than trying to force my thought process. Because I drank the Kool-Aid a long time ago, okay? My home, people come to my home because it's effective and efficient. You know, I live, breathe it like you guys do. Like, you just don't buy into this and just do it for a little bit. You live it. So I try to take that approach and bring everyone on board, and as they're ready, slowly reintroduce new things.
Right, so to actually drive that change, you start with initial wins, things that actually matter to the people who you work with at that moment. We have a couple of questions from the audience, and the first one, let's get it over and done with, is, oh, no, it's not the first one anymore, but let's get it over and done with. Are there more Modern Agile stickers, and where can people find them?
There are more. I've got some in my backpack, so if you want to come up right after this, I can give you some.
So tackle Joshua for that afterwards. So that question keeps on popping up. So how do stakeholders, and I have a question for each and every one of you. So one of the things that we try to do in Agile is try to think away from projects and think products and systems, and think outcomes or services even, that you might say too. So how does that work? How do you move from a project based thinking to a more outcome-based or system-based thinking? Anyone who wants to take this question particularly?
I was just going to say, with the customers I work with, it's very slow and very painful. Because in big governmental type organizations and financial institutions and things like that, in recent history, I'm going to say over the past 20 years, they went through a big period of outsourcing their IT capabilities for efficiency reasons. This isn't our core competency. We're going to box up this function in our organization and move it out there somewhere so that we can get it for cheaper. And now they're coming back to realizing that actually, if being able to do whatever we do, deliver the product or deliver the service that we offer, we're doing this through digital means. IT is a core competency for us. That's a really hard mindset shift for them to get back, because they're still tied up in that cost effectiveness rather than thinking about how do we see what we do as a continuous stream of value to whoever we serve, whether it's, Canadian citizens or the customers of our bank or what have you.
Yeah.
And I don't have a better answer than slowly and painfully, because it's a problem I'm still nodding every day.
Yeah. So I see you nodding, Adriana. Do you have anything to add? Are there any specific techniques that you use to help people change their minds in a totally different way, to thinking about this flow of output instead of just projects?
I have to agree with you, Ellen. I mean, it's a slow and steady. I kind of call it the drip. Okay, just give me the IV. Hopefully they'll get it. Because I deal with leaders all the time, I'm always, what's the ROI? What's the return on investment? What's the ROI? And there are just times where there is no ROI. People. Oh my God, it's a soft skill that I'm giving you. There's a success with that project or outcome, let me not say project, the outcome. And that in itself is going to shift the culture. And because it's something greater, what we're doing here is we're changing the way people are thinking and working. And when you do that, there's this shift that has to happen. But there's a lot of organizations that are still, just give me the spreadsheet and let me make all the decisions based on that spreadsheet. So there's, as I said earlier on, education, a lot of education.
Yeah.
I think also to sort of relate back to your original question to me about all the bubbles and stuff like that.
Yep.
Let's look at that question from the point of view of project managers. So you have this assumption because you have the Agile religion and you're in the Agile bubble from my diagram point of view. So you're in the Agile bubble, and the Agile bubble tells you we got to get rid of projects. Projects are evil and they're a source of problem. That's not the message the project managers are hearing. That's not, and it's certainly not what they want to hear.
Thank you.
And it's certainly not what the PMI is saying. It's certainly not what the ACP certification folks are saying. And there are some of them in the audience right now, by the way, and that's okay. But so this is the fundamental challenge we've got, right? So, taking back to the diagram, there's all these bubbles. And in behind all those bubbles, there's these bodies of knowledge, and there's these religions and belief systems, and they've got their view of the universe. And their view of the universe is not your view of the universe. So you got to look at the bigger picture. And the reason why it's so hard and takes so long is because you've got to engage with those folks. Because you know what? It's a pretty hard sell for me to go to the project manager and say, oh, by the way, we're getting rid of you. That's not a message they want to hear. Right? And oh, by the way, you can add value by becoming a product owner or becoming a this or a that. And it's like, well, no, that's not my career path. I haven't been trained. My PMP doesn't lead me to that. This is not what I want to hear. And this is not what the PMI is telling me. This is not what my religion is. Oh my God, we're all going to die. This is what's going on in their heads, right? And unless we choose to address that as coaches, unless we have a coherent plan to help move that organization away from that mindset and the data management mindset and the ITIL mindset and the Zachman mindset and this mindset and the Scrum mindset and every other mindset, we got a serious problem. And because, you know what? And we're going to have the same issue, these organizations that you could have reworded that saying, well, what do you do when you're trying to tell the Scrum folks we're moving away from Scrum because we want to go to a modern Agile or a more continuous delivery point of view, and we really don't need this Scrum stuff. Well, wait a minute. That's not what my two-day certification process told me. This is, we're threatening these people, and for some reason they push back. So what are you going to do about that?
Right. So Joshua, do you have anything to add to this? Especially because of the last and valid comments, I think, from Scott would be somewhat, you could say, like modern Agile is actually trying to get away from those things as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think I try to look for fertile soil inside of an organization, which means carving out or finding people that are interested in trying new things.
Okay.
And there are those people. There are other people that kind of like the way things are the way they are, which is fine. But if you can find some kind of a group of people that want to experiment, that's the place to maybe begin something called innovation by isolation, which Clay Christensen coined, and try some new stuff with that group and see how it goes. And from there, you'll have your own set of challenges, even if they're successful. The organizational antibodies come out when anything's successful, we know, but it's at least a place to get started if you want to move away from things. And I agree with Scott. I mean, first of all, what someone calls a project might actually be okay. You can get hung up on the word, whereas what they actually mean is it's a product, and we have a project for that product, and it might be actually fine. So we got to be a little careful what we try to dismiss.
Oh, I totally agree, and I don't necessarily know if the people who asked this question meant to get rid of all the project managers specifically. It was more a mindset of how to approach it. So I have another question that I find quite interesting. It's about silos specifically. Silos where everyone does their own little piece of work, and they're asking, well, with all those specialized skills within an IT organization specifically, but also within other organizations, can those silos really be avoided? Is there a way to somehow get rid of them, and how would you approach addressing that particular challenge?
That is a really good question. Silos kill companies, let's be honest. It's crazy because I don't know, I'm sure everyone in this room and on this panel has experienced silo thinking, right? Everyone thinks that they're on the same page, but when you ask, everyone's on the different page, and then we wonder why departments start competing against each other when we're all getting the same paycheck. I take this context out of any type of efficiency work, because earlier on what was said, it doesn't matter whatever your religion is, whatever efficiency methodology you use, it's all good. It's about doing something for the customer and becoming better. But I find over and over of doing this, I've been doing this for over 20 years now, it really comes down to, in my experience, in the different organizations that I've come across, which have been numerous, and this is the common thread that I've seen, is that there's a lack of understanding what the vision is of the organization. It's quite fascinating that that's like the cornerstone, that's the root. And when people are really clear with what the vision of the organization is, and it's actually not just something obtuse like the 30-second elevator speech, but something that is a little more meaty, that people actually start using every day like an actual tool and like a litmus test, and asking, are we on the same page? And actually allowing the people to be empowered by it. It's quite interesting how you can break down those silos. So it has nothing, in my opinion, anything to do with any type of methodology. It really comes down to, do you have vision? And is everybody aware of that? And are you preaching it? And are you speaking it? And are people resonating with it? And are you making, most importantly, decisions based on it, and allowing people to do that as well? So it's kind of out of the context, but a real critical one, because I see this over and over again. I get asked, oh, Adriana, help us with this. Well, what's your common vision? And if I ask each senior executive, they all have a different answer. There's my big problem I have to solve first.
And that need for that shared vision, of course, goes all through the organization, because it's an entrenchment of local optimization, right? It makes perfect sense if all you understand about where your work fits into, if you don't have an understanding of the bigger picture, the big problem you're trying to solve. I'm just trying to do my piece of it, and I'm trying to do it as efficiently as possible and as well as possible. I'm naturally going to create structures where I'm not so worried about what happens over there and what happens over there. I'm just going to do my bit as well as I can, as well as I can, as well as I can. So creating that line of sight for everybody to understand what's the vision and how does what I do fit in with what you do, so that, and this is the really tricky part, so that we can help that customer over there, which often, if you're trapped in your silo, I mean, not only do you not see the other people in the value chain, you have absolutely no line of sight to the recipient or the customer of your work. And it's helping people see the system and understand how all those pieces fit together, so that they can let go of that need for local optimization, because that's something you encounter all the time. I want to optimize my corner of the universe, which runs directly counter to how do we get more value to our customers as quickly and as effectively and as simply as possible.
I just want to build, that was well said. It comes down to the why. Why are we here? Why are we doing this? And then the tool is the efficiency methodology, Agile, whatever it may be. And what I love to start to see with organizations that I introduce this to, or those who are in the middle of it, is you just can't have your vision once and file it away. It's every day. You know, the Americans are really good with their flag and their Pledge of Allegiance. Right? Everyone's really good at that. It's that same premise and concept that you take in with the vision of the organization, the department, whatever it may be. Then, if everyone gets it, like you said, it's amazing. It's amazing what happens in the unfolding that can occur.
Yeah. So we do need to get rid of those silos. We do need to create that shared vision in order for people to work together to get to that goal. So does that, for instance, have specific practices that you use or suggest to get rid of some of those silos, or to address the problem that there's some specialty in a certain field?
Yeah, so so some of the principles behind Discipline Agile is first of all, enterprise awareness. So being aware of the overall organization, not just your piece of it, right? And that's easier said than done. We also talk about optimizing the flow, the overall flow, like Ellen was saying, not just your little piece of it. But we promote this idea of generalizing specialists and trying to learn more skills outside of whatever your specialty is. But you've got this very serious challenge. The industry rewards specialists. Your organization is probably set up to reward specialists. Your HR, your people management effort, desperately wants people to be specialized because they want to have Java programmers at level 1 or level 2 or level 3 because they want to be able to have you in your salary band, right, as a level 3 Java programmer. And they don't want the complexity of people being skilled, collaborating together in order to fulfill some customer need in a value chain. How the hell do I reward that?
How do you measure it?
How do I measure it? How do I hand them a spreadsheet and say, here you go, do this, right? And how do we put together a 5,000 task project plan in order to get this done, right? So there's all these forces, organizational forces and industry forces, and this is not what the vendors want. The vendors desperately want you to certify in their tools and to certify in their technologies and become a certified Java programmer or a certified Oracle DBA, because that is vendor lock-in, because by the time you do all the work to become a senior certified Oracle DBA or whatever that title is, you will never jump to SQL Server or MySQL or something else because you are being well rewarded for being a certified Oracle DBA. So there's all these forces motivating you as an individual to do absolutely the wrong thing, and then you get these agile and lean coaches coming in, let's have a big group hug and let's all learn and do better and support the customer. To hell with the customer, I'm an Oracle DBA. I'm an Oracle DBA, to hell with them. I don't care about them, I get to play with data, right? This is what the reality is on the ground.
It is. So we have another question. I really like this one as well, so I definitely want to give you all an opportunity to answer it. But I'm going to start with you, Joshua. So the question is, what was the one, either professional or personal failure that most positively influenced you?
Okay, let's see, that's a tough question. The most professional failure.
No, the failure the professional or personal failure that influenced you the most in the work that you do.
I'd have to think about that. I can think of something off the top of my head, but I'm not sure if that was the most. I mean, it's a really important question, I think, because we learn a lot from failure. I mean, early on, this was an experience I had which taught me a lot. So we were asked by a very large, this is interesting. We were asked by a very large bank in 2001 to help them because they had a 180-person extreme programming team. And they were having trouble. It was a new VP in the bank who didn't have a lot of power, nor did he have much collaboration from other executives in different departments. So the mistake I made was that we did a very naive assessment. We hadn't normally done any assessments prior to that. So this taught me about the value of assessing a customer to find a win-win. So the assessment was very naive in the sense that we said, well, okay, we'll come in and help you if we can train the team you want us to work with for at least a couple of weeks. They said yes. And we wanted our own open workspace where we can work together as a team, not in cubicles, but open workspace, yes. and you're going to be able to pay us this amount here. And they said yes. So that was the assessment, yes, yes, and yes. And we said, sure, we're in. So we go in there, and it's an absolute disaster. There's an enterprise database department, totally separate from this team, that won't build a database in an evolutionary way, which means that they wanted a complete upfront specification of the entire database, all laid out. To make a long story short, we couldn't really help them, number one. Number two, we discovered after a little while that it really should have been about a 20-person team, not 180. All these managers wanted more and more people to report to them so that they would be more important and they'd make more money. They had way overstaffed. And it taught me the value of doing a proper assessment. So thereafter, we would really work closely with companies to assess them to see, can this be a win-win?
What are the typical things that you're looking for, the non-starters, if you will?
Well, first of all, we don't want to impose on people. So if the entire approach is being imposed on a bunch of people who don't want to actually change, then it's doomed to fail, and there's no point in even trying.
Right.
Then basically, they have to be someone open to experimentation, you know? So they might acknowledge their problems and say they want to change, but then do they really want to change? If we present to them a possible roadmap, are they going to want to try it? So that's important. Then we need to get a cross-functional team, for example, right? There are methods in Agile or Lean that say start where you are and let the team observe the problems. Well, typically, if you're not a cross-functional team, if you're a bunch of component silos, then you're not going to have success. We know you're not going to have much success at all. So we kind of try to see, would they be willing to experiment with a truly cross-functional team? So those are the kinds of things we look for, and we want executive support. We want to have the kind of support from management and executives that will allow us to get through the impediments and actually make a real experiment that we could learn from.
I guess that's a really good list. So, Rihanna, have you had some ideas about the biggest the failure that influenced you most in your work?
I was really listening to Joshua, so I couldn't think in my head and formulate an answer.
If you're not ready and somebody else
No,
is.
I'm good. It's first of all, failure is good. Okay, failure is good. We just treat it like it's bad, and depending on your culture and your organization, you fail and then you're told you're terrible, and how can you do that? And that's probably the worst approach you can do, because through failure we learn, and particularly with the Agile methodology, which is constant checking in, the Lean, the Six Sigma, like failure's a good thing. That's how we get to the really cool, innovative stuff, is through failure. So I embrace failure. Of course I had failures. Oh my God. I think the biggest failures I remember the most are with people, not in regards to a project, because you can always kind of muddle through the project. At some point you're going to get picked up and it's going to get cleaned up and it's going to be good ultimately in the end. But my failures I pick up on is, maybe did I talk to that person incorrectly? I could have done that differently, that interaction. And so it's that learning skill over my career that I always try to learn from that. Because, I've had clients that loved me and then don't love me.
Yeah. So for you, it's more like a category of failures, like the way that you interact with people specifically. Okay, wonderful. Scott, Alan?
Yeah, so I guess one of my more memorable failures, I've had a lot, so it's hard to pick, but is actually at a bank here in town. So, so at a bank here in town. And we were on a team. We were doing an Agile-ish type of a process and sort of a DevOps-y thing. And we were delivering into production once a week, which at the time for the bank was absolute rocket science. We were way ahead of the pack. And we were supporting our own app, and we were having support calls measured in minutes. From identification to actual resolution in minutes. Meanwhile, all the other teams were being measured in days. So order of magnitude improvements, and which you think would be good, right? If you think people would appreciate this. And we were communicating what we're doing and sharing without trying to share with others. But What we didn't realize is that in the environment, we were so far ahead that what do you do if you're all these other teams, right? Either you got to make a choice where either you decide to, hey, maybe let's learn from these guys and get better ourselves, or we better crush these guys because they're a threat. So we got crushed. And because it's a heck of a lot easier to crush the good guys than it is to do the work. And so it was an abysmal failure, because even though locally that was a huge success, and you think the organization would have embraced that, organizationally it was an absolute failure because we didn't play the game, and we didn't we didn't do all the politicking that would have been required, and years of politicking, and then it would have gone, it was a bank, so it'd be totally dysfunctional. But it would go off in the middle, and it would have just died on the vine anyways. But, we're doing a skunk works thing, so you had to, which you had to do to survive. But yeah, we got crushed anyways, even though like all the numbers were greatly in our favor, like just we shone on every quality and stakeholder satisfaction. We were the most favorite team, and best support, all this sort of stuff. And yet, what do? You crush that team because you couldn't possibly tolerate that. Yeah. So it was a very, very interesting thing. Wonderful learning, but good for me, not so good for them, but
Alan, do you have an experience as well?
Well, while I was sitting here listening to other people talk, I was trying to figure out which of my numerous failures to pick from to share, because there have been many. But I think what really changed the course of how I think about my work and what I do was when I started off as a freelance Agile coach, I was working in a Crown corporation where a senior vice president had suddenly become very, very interested in Agile, and they had brought in a whole bunch of coaches to work with all of the teams in their IT department to change how they worked. And we came in and we were really excited and enthusiastic, and we were able to make lots of little, small, local changes to help people work together more effectively, to help people be more productive, to help people be happier about what they were doing. But as you mentioned, the organizational antibodies, that success was so contained because there was support up here and there was enthusiasm down here, and nobody in the middle was really on board. And it was ultimately very frustrating for me as a coach, partly because we couldn't help affect the kind of change that we needed to see from we hoped for from the organization. But I felt really bad about setting up individuals for disappointment, because they had experienced we could work differently. There is a better way of doing this, and they just kept running into walls everywhere they looked. And I had a couple of gigs like that earlier in my career, and that was the point at which I decided I'm not going to take those just sort of isolated team coaching gigs anymore, because when you want to make organizational change, starting small is awesome. Let's do little small experiments to see what will work in this environment. But unless you're sort of really thinking about and actively working to make sure there's support for those experiments all the way up the chain, you're pretty much doomed to failure. Yep. Because all you're doing is reinforcing the situation of it's those people over there who need to change, the rest of us are just fine. Yep. And that's not a recipe for
That's a great experience
success.
As well. So unfortunately our time is almost over, so I have one more question to actually finish off with, and that's for each and every one of you as well. And that is, what's next? Right? So there's an awful lot of talk about scaling, there's an awful lot of talk about can we go back to the roots? There's so many people right now that are doing Agile that not everyone has the same understanding of it, and as a result they need an awful lot of guidance and practices to move their ship forward. What's next? What are the challenges that are coming at us next, and what will the influence be? And I would appreciate if you could keep that a short answer, unfortunately.
I'll go first, short answer, business agility. How does the rest of the organization change in order to support Agile work? Because if part of the organization is Agile and part of the organization really isn't, that way lies madness.
Right. And you would need also simple principles to overlook the entire thing so everyone understands what everyone is involved in.
As Josh said this morning, it's about scaling the principles,
correct,
not the practices, and helping introduce those principles through the organization.
Yeah.
I want to build off of that because I'm in agreement. As someone who's an outsider and looking into Agile, Lean and Six Sigma has already gone through this, and it's still an issue. it won't ever go away. So I think for you guys, it's definitely the scaling part. And it's also for you guys, look at me, it's you guys versus no. No. But it just, it's that whole, how do you introduce this concept to other departments and not just the main department you're working in? Like Agile is usually associated with IT, right? So like in Lean and Six Sigma, we're in all departments now. And it's different than manufacturing, right? So that's the challenges I see you guys going through that other discipline has been going through for a while.
Scott?
Harsh thing to say, but I think basic competency, I think this is missing, particularly in the Agile space. We're still struggling, like almost 20 years later, with basic issues and code quality and technical debt and architecture and how do you do this, how do we do that? And we're having the same conversations over and over and over and over and over again. I was talking with one lady just earlier this morning, and they're a couple years in their transformation efforts, and her biggest complaint was all these meaningless Agile certifications. They're basically participation ribbons. Congratulations, your check didn't bounce. You're certified in something, and this is the norm, and we don't push back, and we have no integrity, and and the coaches aren't doing anything about it, and the coaches are often part of the problem. And we really need to up our game, and we need to respect ourselves and to become craftspeople and get better at this stuff and to understand the bigger picture. And we were talking earlier about being wider skilled and getting out of the silos. But we've got to respect ourselves, and we got to stop looking for these easy solutions and these pretty posters and these take 4 days of training and suddenly you can run an Agile transformation too. If you fall for that, you deserve what you get. So I think we really need to step up and really start focusing on the fun. A lot of people are laughing, but it's not funny. It really isn't. We really need to find a way to help people get better and just to stop this nonsense.
Okay, so Joshua.
Yeah, I think what's coming next is more of what we have been seeing, of course, which is faux Agile, is going to get even. It's a $1 billion industry in faux Agile, which is not going to lead to very many great successes. So I think what we really need to see, and what I hope to create out there, are the inspirational stories, the things that inspire people to actually be truly Agile, which means at the end of the day, the bottom line looks really good. You're making good money. People are really happy at work. The customers love the products or services. That is what we need to grow in the future. And we can only do that, I think, with being scholars, right? Being studious and learning the craft. You have to be good at the craft. And that is what real practitioners, like the people that come to these conferences, care about. They really do care about the joy of being awesome. And that is what we need to grow in our community, not this faux Agile stuff, and learn how to distinguish between the two. And the other prediction I'm going to make for the future is the U.S. will have a new president fairly soon.
It looks like some people actually agree with that as well, or at least want to. So thank you so much, Adriana from Cornerstone Dynamics, Scott Amber from Scott Amber and Associates, Alan Grove from Agile Partnership, and Joshua Kuryevsky from Industrial Logic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.